Sounds.
No chairs.
Right. Go ahead and get started. I do need to leave at about 8:30 today, unfortunately. We can get through most of the agenda and ready to provide Simon. Okay, so public comments for today. Anyone have any public comments to share? All right, so we'll go right into the minutes from February 7th. Can you just
in 6.2? Very minor. What I was saying was, since the kids are really into no momentum, David's idea that the kids have been really into no momentum since they're into no momentum, and we all like others.
make any comments on the minutes from February 7th? Or discussion on each motion renders, all right. In favor of minutes as amended, please say aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? All right, great. Thank you, everyone. Simon, nice job with the last set of meeting minutes for us.
Yay! I met with Jeff. I saw that one. I met with Jim. That sounds like she's getting on the first time that I ever went into the uni. I didn't know that place existed.
Pretty. So you never been in there?
Going back 100 years.
Yeah, that's a lot of history.
Yeah.
So we're on for 7:10 for next. You did tell me that, can you?
Okay. You have to do the strategic trail reroute update.
You can do, yeah. So we went to select board last night. You remember we talked about this way back in May, June. We approved it. Glenn Card as well. We chat with him about his farming activities. He's out in California pollinating. Yes. Yeah, well, he's got bees down in New Zealand. Yeah. He's a busy guy. But anyway, the select board approved the. So really, I think the two main things are taking out gap in the hedgerow models and talking about the strengths of and he's also going to take out the I think he talks about some storage. I don't know if he does. I'm assuming he's going to do that. Yeah. He's got to comply with, well, I don't want to say what Ethan tells him, but use.
So I know he said that the cow grazing area, pasture area, that stays pretty clear.
Yeah, the cows eating invasives. Yeah, so we talked about we as in conservation doing some signage. So start thinking about doing the same thing with information.
Did he, sorry, maybe you said this, but did he say when he would begin?
He's looking to do it later on in the year's opportunity.
Business? I feel like we should, I should have done this when we started, but we should probably introduce ourselves. Let's do it. Hi, Andrew. I am Eric Howe. I'm the chair of the Conservation Commission for a couple of moments.
Nice to meet you. Yeah, I've met some of you. Yeah, so I've been the planning technician for just about a year and a half now. Graduated from UVM 2022. Where are you from? From here and from Rhode Island as well. I kind of split time. Shuttle run and then moved down and high school and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Nice. I'm Dave Westman. I'm the vice chair of Conservation Commission, and I'm the commissioner.
Sweet.
Jerry.
Required. Zoom, we have Kim's able to unmute in her morning frenzy of getting her kids on the bus and everything, but Kim Pullman's was the heritage.
Yeah, that one. That's been really hard to stop saying that. It's
All right, cool. Well, we're looking forward to working with you. We have Simon and Matt and I met last Friday, and we had a long to-do list things to work on over the next months.
a lot of really exciting things.
Yes.
Thinking about what we're talking about.
Right.
Yeah, actually happening. Exciting time.
Yeah, Jacob Brand's coming off this university.
Yes.
Do we have time on this agenda to talk about?
Sure. Waiting for
Yeah.
folks to talk about that for a few minutes. So we talked about the ERF funding.
We talked about Shelburne have the item on it dollars. There's a donate. Second. I don't think anyone else.
Does that mean it has to be voted on?
Yeah. So it's a separate thing.
Burning that. Solidified 38, 25.
So I thought it could be a good just same leadership.
So yeah, we could think about bringing someone in from Shelburne, either town or conservation commission, talk about that. So now, weeks. Sounds like their first attempts. Yeah.
See whether it's consistent.
It's a really bad use.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And they have to vote on it every single year. Or is this?
So yes, if they take that approach, it sounded like you're going for like not a one-time appropriation, but a once in every couple of years. So they're asking for 100,000, which is what we have to. Get a certain level. So I guess what their thought process was to get them there. That worked out in the end. And we also talked about on ERF, we talked about taking a look at the Williston 2050 survey results. There's some questions in there that might help inform some future outreach efforts as well. At least either to the select board in our memo. Because a few of the level they want this is look like in 2015, but it's considering achieve those visions. We talked about Jacob Krantz. Municipal Park District is coming back on March 20th. Set aside for the 20th.
So that was to talk about three main things that Nick was going to do. So the easement. So latter to
and Simon suggested keep them in the agenda. Keep them on track. October, fall anyway. Completion project. So I'll put it in your schedule that they reviewed this last time.
Yes. But it's not the largest. It's not the largest parcel, and there's a lot of established firms. They're able to reuse some of that infrastructure. It's so much work, but it's still pretty fast.
Yeah, even if it's not the
Like
completion of the
migration.
trails, it's just the transition of the whole parcel of property.
It really just only gate that little farmers keep. But they don't want to do public vehicles going down that access. But that's really like the main issue.
And then we talked about the town plan, town putting together task forces that will engage with us as needed. Our goal is to have rough drafts of the chapters to the select board by the end of the summer. So we may have some conservation commission topics this chapter. 30 by 30 with the HCB, they're coming in today. Back to ERF again, outreach to being more proactive, reach to landowners who own those high priorities. Doing broad outreach to the community. And then also, kind of see this as a maybe a part two to the Wild Williston. Just inviting, who you did this reading, invite the folks who have conserved land here in for a cake and ice cream kind of event. I think that would acknowledge it. Can do something like that, but that could
Actually, it's private invites some of them individually.
It was cake. It's good cake.
There wasn't any room in there, so.
Yeah. We talked about doing some outreach on current use changes for old growth forests. Bring them in at some point to chat with us more about that. There's a whole thing that's been on my to-do list for years now, which is putting together an invitation package. 7 meetings.
It's not a typo. Minor detail.
It's not a typo.
Hey, did you know we met at 7 a.m.?
You do.
Okay, all right, yeah. Just checking. Early riser. It works.
Some green up day planning, which we did last week actually, with Sustainable Williston and then Mucho. But that was sorry. The Bobolink program outreach with Mass Audubon. Simon pointed out that this project's coming up for discretionary permit at 699 Hill. It's the first habitat disturbance assessment in the system, including the consultant close to the take a look at that a little bit more closely. So I had my notes.
Yeah, sorry, Jack, you're here for Toby. Can you hear what I am saying?
Jim said the audio.
Hey guys, Jacques, are you trying to talk to me? I'm Jacques from Civil Engineering Associates. Not sure if you can hear me.
Sorry, I'm just gonna.
Yeah, you guys are really hard to hear, so I wasn't. Yeah, you guys.
Yes. I wasn't either. Maybe Simon or maybe they do more with it than they've been partially responsible for it for a long time.
Right.
Alan Strong worked on it in the UVM too. I believe with them doing some kind of joint years ago it started. Yeah, I was back in my day, guys. Yeah, working on that. Yeah. I'm really glad that you guys filed that list. That sounds like the right things we've been trying to prioritize.
It's the end of the
hookah tree.
You do
I guess I've just restarted the owl, so I don't know if that means anyone who's online can hear what I'm saying now, or whether it's still patchy. Otherwise,
That's a lot better if you guys can hear me.
Yeah, we can.
Awesome.
Okay, yeah, that's way clearer. Okay, that's great. So I wasn't exactly sure what you guys were talking about. I'll be 100% honest. Till I heard you yell Jack. And anyway, thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Do you wanna start on this?
Yep,
item?
let's do it. So we have discretionary permit 24-16 with the, I'm not sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it, Tayabi subdivision. So we've got Jacques on board here today to chat with us about the project. Jacques, would you like to introduce the project to us?
Yeah, so this is proposed 2-lot subdivision at 2255 Mountain View Road. This is part of a lot that was subdivided back in the late 90s. You know, I'd say half the lot is basically home and lawn. The other half is kind of forested, or brushy vegetation. And yeah, I mean, really, as straightforward as we could possibly have. You know, we're requesting municipal water and sewer, its own driveway, and yeah, and a single family home on the new lot.
All right.
So this, like, so I think you probably are familiar with this, where this parcel is. It's near parcel that we spend a lot of time looking at, as does everyone else. And also a great place to go in the summer. That was fun.
Yeah.
So it's just a 2-lot split to create one additional home. The existing parcel has 2.5 acres, so they're dividing it into 1.3 and 1.2. It's going to be on town water and sewer. Because it's less than 2.5 acres and they're not proposing more than 4 homes. They don't go through growth management and they don't need to set aside open space. Those of you who are familiar with the detailed nuances of our zoning regulations will probably have noticed that 1.3 acres and 1.2 acres don't meet the minimum lot sizes in the ARZD. The reason for this is that the state implemented the Home Act last year. And one of the things that does is it means the parcels in a residential district, which is served by water and sewer, we've got to permit a density of up to 5 dwellings per acre. So there are a handful of parcels in the ARZD. So along the north side of Mountain View Road, and there's about 10 on 2A south of Hurricane Lane, the sort of outliers where they're in the ARZD, but they're also on water and sewer. So we might get a few of these coming up over the next few years, where these people are sort of, they're in the rural zone, but they're allowed residential density because they're on water and sewer. This exception doesn't apply to areas where the town extended water and sewer to remediate environmental hazards. So, for example, Meadow Ridge is on water and sewer, but that was extended because their septic system failed, so they don't get this bonus, same as, you know, Porterwood and other places like that. So these are the areas where it applies. Might come up again a few times as people realise.
Does that exception apply to, so you're saying water and sewer, it's not water or sewer?
No, water and sewer, yeah.
Is your question of whether a property that was on sewer but not water would qualify? But
Yeah.
in our town, maybe everything is that
No, there are houses that are
water but not sewer?
water but not sewer.
Okay. Interesting.
One more question. So I know that there's a parcel that's for sale on the corner right there by Old Stage and Mountain View. That's separate from this subdivision?
Yes, the little, yeah, towards the west, there's a clump of
That's Edgerman owned. I didn't realize that.
trees. Yeah,
Well, that's
that
what it
is
says up here.
a separate parcel.
Okay,
So it's just that little leg, it's not the whole
right,
piece behind it?
yeah,
Well, look, Edgerman House is right here, right?
Yeah.
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 I didn't realize they owned on the other side. of it.
There's a for sale sign, in that general area of on the whatever it is, the west side of this parcel that we're looking at. So I just want to confirm that that's separate from this project.
I'll be honest, I don't know if it's separate. I know Tanya, or not Tanya, Yasmin had been talking about she possibly will sell, she's gonna sell this lot. She lives next door. So she was gonna sell, so I don't know if she put something up or if that's something different. I'm not familiar with where exactly that sign is located, but there is a separate parcel there on the corner of Old Stage Road and Mountain View Road.
Okay, thanks. All right, Simon, did you want to run through the,
Yep, so low priority for conservation, there's no trails on the official map or map 17 of our plan. It is in significant wildlife habitat area. So you can see it's got both wildlife travel corridor and core habitat. Wildlife travel corridor being the brown hatch and core habitat being the green shading. So it will have an impact on that. It's sort of like zooming out, it does look like it sort of links Glazer and Northridge over here with the ARZDs north of Mountain View Road. So that's one just to spend a bit of time on and have a think about. We do require a habitat disturbance assessment for that. We don't have any UREITs, UNCs, or farmland here. It is within a primary middle ground view shed. I guess we sort of done to death the view shed in this area, looking over Glazer. This is sort of on the periphery of that. And I've got a little green star there that indicates where it is. I guess this is one of those ones where the lack of information about what the people who have drafted these things are actually intending is unhelpful. If we take a view from where the viewpoint is, it basically sort of looks over Glazer, and I think they'd be over here. And I imagine those trees are probably different than what they looked like in the 1980s. But that said, it is in view shed, so if you guys want to have a look at that, you can. It doesn't seem like it's particularly prominent to me. I guess maybe I think the Eserman's house was identified as a focal point there.
Before those trees grew up, you probably could see the house on the corner, but not the house where the land we're talking about here, because it drops off there where Adams intersection across the road from Adams. So
no wetlands or flood hazard areas. And then lastly, because they're in the ARZD and the parcel's generally forested, we recommended the half-acre clearing limit. There we are. So we've got some findings and some recommendations for people to discuss.
Thank you, Simon. One question I should probably know the answer to, but this one is coming straight in through. Oh, this is pre-app, sorry.
Yeah, this is
I thought I saw a discretionary permit, but okay, never mind. Any other questions or comments from the committee, the commission?
Reed. Just thinking through the habitat impacts. I just wanted to share the things that I'm looking for when it comes to discretionary is how short the driveway can be and how much clearing can be avoided and or reforestation to preserve connectivity. If you scroll up just slightly, Simon, to the map there, it doesn't show significant wildlife habitat area just to the north there where the orchard is. However, I would imagine there's enough tree cover there that a lot of animals feel like they can move through the orchard at night and stuff like that. So it definitely looks like it would be great to maintain as much forest cover as possible based on what Jens coached us on.
Is there a fence between the orchard and this parcel?
I don't believe so, no.
I think it's open.
That certainly helps alleviate that migration concern, I guess.
Jacques, is there a reason that the driveway is that long and not closer to the road?
In this particular sketch, we've just essentially mimicked the existing house site. That's essentially what's been done. We totally, I don't particularly have any issues with the restrictions on building envelopes. That's, was recommended in the staff report. I think it's definitely a interesting site for a habitat expert to take a look at.
I would like to just comment on the length of the driveway as well. Since the new building would be on sewer and water, you don't need to have a place for, leach field or sewer,
Mhm.
so the driveway could be shortened. The house could be put into the field. And that would keep that habitat corridor
Mhm.
in the back there open. And knowing that that parcel right on the corner is for sale, and a potential house would be built there. That would even restrict the flow of wildlife even more, having 3 houses in a row. So yeah, so if the house could be moved closer to the road. And, even to have the driveway join with the other, to have a shared driveway as opposed to 2 separate. Not only for, less impermeable surfaces, but to, for traffic as well.
I would like to add, because while you guys asked me the question earlier, about the for sale sign, I did look up on just real estate websites, and it does look like the owner, that is for this lot 1B. That is what that sign is for. So I did see that on.
Maybe
online
what?
here. So I guess they're anyway, I just letting you know, because it's you saw the sign and it's online, so it doesn't look like, yeah, it doesn't look like it's for the neighboring property as Ezerman, so that's listed on this particular map.
So your client has the whole parcel for sale, the house and the.
Well, obviously they don't have any permits, but
Yeah.
but they're letting people know that they're working on something.
Gotcha.
Seems like that piece to the west there, that thin piece,
Mhm.
I wonder if that's even buildable.
Sure.
I mean, it seemed, yeah, Esmond, it looks like they also own,
Behind it.
yeah, it kind of goes like this.
Yeah.
So I don't know if,
Yeah.
it seems like this is too narrow.
I know Farmer Adams leases a huge chunk of that land, like he does
Yeah.
not own all.
Yeah. So my guess is there wouldn't be a house, you couldn't fit one in that.
Even with the new.
I don't know, that's good.
Yeah.
I wanted to comment on Terry's point, if I may, which is just that I understand completely that generally we like to have shorter driveways. But Mountain View Road is an exceptionally busy road, and I would not want to have a house directly to Mountain View Road personally. So I think the setback is sort of, in order for them to sell the house, in order for that property to be of any value, they need to be able to set that house back far enough away from the road.
Well, there are plenty of houses that are.
Yeah, I was just gonna
Right
say,
on
if
the
you
road.
look along there, I'm glancing at it right now, most of them are.
They're
Would
pretty
would
close.
be in, the house would be like in here.
See the
next
It would be
picture.
half the length of the driveway.
As you get closer to Williston, North Williston Road, they are pretty much right
Right.
on the road.
Yeah, that must be a historical thing, right? I mean, when the
Those
roads.
carriages. Or
Yeah, right,
single lane road.
right.
Before
Not,
those.
not what it is now, I guess. I mean, and in all honesty, though, I do think that like there's something to be said for, we have to think about what the future of Mountain View Road really is, given all of this development. I don't think it can stay in its present state for much longer, right? And so.
I would imagine there's eventually gonna be a signal at that intersection, and so it's not gonna be as much fast moving traffic as there is today.
But there would be idling traffic, in which
There might
case
be.
no one wants to have a house next to idling traffic.
So I mean, I think as a conservation commission, we're more focused on preserving the corridor and the wildlife
Yeah.
habitat, not about how a house is gonna sell. That's not.
No, that point is, I understand that.
But that is something that could come up with, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is a fairly deep lot. So part of me does wonder whether they could shift it slightly further towards the bottom, but still maintain that separation from the road. And just essentially buffer the orchard.
I mean, for me, it would be what, I would like to see as many trees retained as possible to not sort of clear it out as a fully landscaped lawn, the way that other house is.
Yeah.
So
I think this other house probably predates well, maybe there was no forest there to start with. But predates the half-acre clearing limit.
That's correct, yeah.
Whereas this one, half acre is about, I don't know, 35% of the of the parcel. So that would be more of a limit. I mean, I guess looking at this, the travel corridor actually goes on both sides of the parcel. Not sure how many animals use this particular.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that western and northwestern corner of the parcel, to me, looks like what I would, from a sky view, what I would imagine wildlife would be using, not where the other house and its driveway is, so. That's just what I'm looking for as it moves to discretionary.
And we'll have another look at this after it goes.
Yeah. When it comes
goes
through.
on, yeah.
After the wildlife assessment. right?
Yeah.
I have just one question. So that whole area does have pretty wet soils. Like I could see evidence of wetlands to the east of there and even just across from the backyard of that house, the existing house. You can see in the orchard that there's something going on with those trees. There's a bare spot. And so I'm just wondering, do we know that there's not like hydric soils in there? In that area?
Well, we check so we have our own mapping and we have the state's wetland advisory layers, which is what we check for wetlands. The standard in the bylaws is that where wetlands are suspected, we can request a delineation.
Okay. I mean, just looking at the aerial, it doesn't look like that particular parcel, but would have wetlands, but there clearly are at least hydric soils in that general area. Well, I guess.
It's not a bit of a rise.
Yeah.
I mean, Jack, presumably you've been on the parcel, so you know what it's like out there. Do you have any perspective on that?
That's it's the wetlands interesting discussion. Like I saw your guys' comments and, we're gonna do our due diligence. And we have had it initially reviewed and we're gonna have it for a little bit further reviewed this spring. For wetlands, I don't think there are any substantial wetlands. There might be a pocket of 2 of class 3 according to our wetland ecologist. But again, she reviewed it a few weeks ago when there was no snow and there was still snow in the woods. So we're actually looking into that further. And the reason we did that is because when I looked at the old subdivision plat, I saw I guess this was lot 1, or this is lot 2. The lot to the east on this map on the screen is lot 1, and that lot had some type of wetland on the southeast corner along Mountain View. And so I felt with that previous map having something on it, that it was prudent to just get an expert opinion on this parcel before we just went off. So we are going to have that reviewed in more detail. So it's perhaps something you guys can write it down, or we're already reviewing it if you want it as a condition or something, but or a recommendation. But we're looking into it.
Right, thanks, Chuck.
Simon, why is the habitat corridor? It looks like there's like a little space right in
I
the middle
live
of
in
it.
there, yeah.
What, do you know?
I think the way that they did these maps was primarily based on aerial imagery. So I think when things show up differently, somehow it affected like what the vegetation cover was. And this may have looked quite different back when they did this sort of 12, 13 years ago. I mean, it does come up from time to time, like why is this here? But just because there's no vegetation there doesn't mean it's
But it looks
No,
like
yeah.
that's where the forested area is.
Yeah.
If anything, that'd be more important there.
Right.
It's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this looks like this is fairly new, just from the aerial.
Mm-hmm.
If you
Yeah.
if you drive down Mountain View Road, the trees on the road look more mature than that.
Yeah.
By any chance, I know that we haven't, the bylaw amendments with the new SWHA mapping haven't been accepted yet, but
Yeah.
because there's that weird empty spot, could we take a peek at the new map and see what it shows? Since it was more,
Yeah,
It got rid of some of those weird things.
yeah.
You can navigate through that website pretty good, Simon.
Yeah.
I just like,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what
It comes up with all the layers on.
Okay. That's so weird.
Is that a consequence of soil types or something to that effect, or?
It's like,
So looking at it here, it looks like it's tier 3,
yeah,
and then you've got some sort of road crossing there.
Maybe we can have, instead of a 4-way intersection, a 6-way intersection, and the 6th is for the animals.
an Animal Crossing,
Animal.
or a traffic
it's
circle.
interesting
There you go.
how it leaves out the orchard because, and this is a thing with agricultural land, is that they don't consider that as valuable habitat. Wildlife habitat in the crossing, but meanwhile, if you talk to that apple orchard owner, they're gonna tell you that there's a ton of deer in there.
Plenty
And
of
there's a
eating
lot
those
of
apples.
animals, so it really is too bad that there is a, not an inclusion of agricultural lands, and I remember talking to Jens about that, it's like, we have 30 acres of field on our.
Well, and an
land.
orchard is different than a cornfield.
Yes.
It's
that's
because
true, right.
there's-
So it
there's
should be part of.
shade.
Yeah, but plus, remember the ag can't be, you can't
I know.
designate what it can be used
Right.
for, so maybe that's another reason they don't
Could
worry
change.
about it too much.
Yeah.
Is that we can't manage it, we can't tell you what to do with it.
I just think this is where Jens would advise us to use our judgment. We gotta look at what's around it and say, okay, we know for sure that there's some good habitat and there's some connectivity here, and then you look at what's there and you say, okay, there's an orchard that's been there for a long time. The deer and other wildlife are probably going through there.
And plus that weird patch, I mean, that's wooded. That's definitely
Yeah,
what the animals are gonna be
Maybe.
using, not the field. That little west piece, that is that little leg.
Thanks for pulling it up, but
I mean,
it's still there.
It might be to do with the fact that I think, as I understand it, Jens was mapping forest blocks. And to me, a forest block like this is not a forest block.
Yeah.
It barely
Yeah.
qualifies as a word.
Yeah, I find it all very interesting. I think, one piece that may help fill your guys' planning gaps maybe is just historically, in 1999, when I look at the aerial photography, that there was no trees on this lot at all. So when it was originally subdivided, it was completely an agricultural field, it appears. And then, I don't know when those maps started to get developed, but in 2004, there was some brush that pretty much maps out that same shape that you see on the screen now. Pretty much is identical to that shape. And then the rest was ag field. And then now, obviously, we fast forward to 2024, 20 years later, and most of it's grown up. So that just may, give you guys a little bit more history and you guys can piece that together as far as when and how your maps were developed. But so
I think the
share that.
assessment's really the main point here.
Yeah.
We gotta get.
So do we want to have a look at the findings and recommendations?
Yes, thanks for entertaining me.
All right, so finding one. This is in the ARZD, subdivision of parcel lot land less than 10.5 acres, not required to set aside open space. Do we need to acknowledge that new law?
But that's
No,
more of a DRB thing in my mind.
okay.
Hi all, sorry, I just wanted to say I'm Yasmin, I'm the owner. I'm in Egypt, so I just joined. Sorry to miss the beginning here.
That's okay, thanks for logging in.
Yeah, thanks for the reminder.
All right, so the subject parcel is designated as a low priority for conservation in the area prioritization map. Does not contain a desired trail. It's within the significant wildlife habitat area. Some primary middle ground viewshed area and does not have any uncommon, rare, threatened or endangered species, etc. Any other findings or comments on those findings? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on
I
to,
guess on the point that we just spent all of that time talking about, the significant wildlife habitat area, is that finding just meant to reflect the border of the property? Cause it's like what does that mean that that hole is in the middle of it? Like, does that matter for anything, Simon?
Not for this, we're just stating the fact.
Okay,
The fact is, it's on the map.
great, thanks.
Okay.
Sorry, because I did join just a smidge late. I wanted to check, and maybe Jacques already went over this, what it is that we need to do for that wildlife. Is it the wildlife map, wildlife trail?
I think
Well-
that's about what we're about to get into as far as the
Oh,
assessment,
okay.
I think, right? So we're at the recommendations, and so we had a good discussion, they had a good discussion, the Conservation Committee, about the mapping, and there are some interesting pieces of the map, but nonetheless, there's clearly forested area where wildlife has a way to travel on the property today, so.
Okay, sorry, carry on. I'll listen in for the feedback then.
no worries. Okay, so recommendations, first one. Habitat disturbance assessment should be prepared. Any questions or comments on that one?
The only thing I would say is perhaps it should, I don't know if it needs to be put in here, but I'd like to know their opinion about the orchard to the north and its impact, which maybe they wouldn't look at normally. I don't know if they look at surrounding parcels when they do their habitat disturbance assessment.
Yeah, they must look at connectivity a little bit to see whether there's a corridor, so that.
So maybe it's already covered.
So the second sentence actually gets to this point, which is that this is now the town procured assessor. And that the applicant needs to contact the town in order to get that assessment completed. Can we ask the assessor to include that as part of this assessment?
We can ask them to, we
Comment.
can't compel them to survey someone else's land.
Of course.
But we can ask them to give us an opinion about how this land interacts with what they can see of the adjoining.
With the general connectivity
Yeah,
of the area.
That's what I was speaking to.
Is there, yeah, and I would just, obviously, on the back and forth that we were having on the length of the driveway, that really seems that seems like the main point, right? Is that like, I've never read one of these. So does a disturbance assessment sort of get into the impact of a longer driveway versus a shorter driveway, and where like an ideal placement of the house?
it would do. I mean, to my mind, the driveway in itself isn't necessarily the issue. It's the fact that the driveway results in that thing that it serves being pushed way back into the habitat area.
Right.
Yeah, my guess is the assessment would say, avoid, minimize impacts in this certain areas, and then the shortening the driveway is the tool we would use to avoid that.
Okay, thanks.
I actually have a question about that. So we bought this land, and I'm sure you guys know now, I want to say 2015. And of course, we're dividing the parcel, but would we not have gone through a similar process with that first piece, with the parcel as it was jointly, as we're going through now? Like, would they not have said avoid that area on the parcel? I guess I'm just curious if we've already had some version of this done back in the day.
Probably not, and even if they did, it wouldn't be valid now, I guess is the short answer to that.
Yasmin, your property was subdivided in the late 90s, and So I believe for you to build your house, you only needed to do a building permit. And you were subject to whatever that 1999 or 8 or whatever the year approval was. So I don't know when the Conservation Commission first started, but perhaps that predates this particular
Okay.
board.
Yep, makes sense. Just curious.
All right, so conservation number 2, recommendation number 2, Conservation Commission recommends mitigation measures, enhancement measures. Positioning of the building envelope, anything to add or?
Do you wanna suggest shortening the driveway here or?
I would like to
Yeah,
suggest
I would
that.
like to see that.
All right, anything else for number 2? All right, number 3, site plan should show defined building envelope, half acre or less. No structures, of course, clearing outside the envelope. And number 4, permit application shall be accompanied by a complete runoff and erosion control checklist. Anything else for that one? Okay, any other recommendations that folks would like to propose?
I was thinking you might wanna, put a recommendation in for the wetlands.
Sounds like it's already gonna happen, but we
But,
can
yeah.
recommend it based on what we see too.
Mhm.
So, I guess. So that's what we normally put in for,
Giant on the spot.
the advantage of doing this time and time again, is, you know,
Andrew?
we know like what we're gonna say. So those are the two parts, and I think this basically just says, go out and do a delineation if there's any wetlands. Sounds like it's not clear whether there will actually be any on this parcel or not.
Visit. Jacques, since you were going to have someone do that, is it an extra step to have it confirmed with the Vermont Wetlands Office?
No, that's all part of our process.
Okay,
I would be happy with 5 and 6.
yeah,
The other thing, if everyone's happy with that, I can't do this one on the spot, but if there are wetlands on the parcel, that makes it is no longer a low risk development, and it doesn't really it's not a big deal. It just means they need a site specific erosion control plan to protect that.
We could address
wetland.
that at discretionary though, right
Yeah.
after the.
Yeah.
Wetland.
Yeah. I mean, I can tweak that recommendation and just say, like, if it's low risk, this is what you do. If it's high risk, that's what you do. Although Andrew can.
Could you just modify that last sentence in number 4 to remove the qualifications of low risk developments and just say something like compliance with the standards outlined in WDB 9.5.1 and the other one? Or that?
Yeah. You said you couldn't do it on the spot.
Put the O in application where it belonged in erosion. Did you see how you did that? The O came 10 words later.
My brain doesn't function quite quickly.
I think it does. I think it does.
All right, excellent. Anything else for the recommendations for this project?
Yasmin, since you're the owner and we have you on the phone now, is that part of the property wet in the spring or fall?
I have never known it to be, but all truth be told, we don't really walk over there all that often. It's usually every once in a while, just, I don't know, for some random reason. But I would be surprised if it was really wet.
I'll move approval of the recommendations as drafted.
Thank you, Reed.
Second.
Thank you, David. Any discussion on the motion? Not, I have, votes for all in favor of the motion as proposed?
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? Okay, motion carries. Thank you, Yasmin and Jacques for logging in today.
Thanks, sorry for the last minute. So next step is just that, the meeting, right, March, I don't know if it's the 12th or whatever it is. Is that correct?
Yeah, you'll need to go to the DRB meeting on March the 12th.
Okay, perfect. All right, thank you guys, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Have a good
Appreciate
meeting.
your time.
Bye.
All right, so coming up next, we've got the VHCP with their Vermont Conservation Strategy Initiative. Well, this is their interview with us.
Yeah.
Right. Who's coming in for this one?
I think someone from Nature for Justice, Soraya Whitehead.
And Zariah is logging in.
Yeah,
So this is the Vermont Housing Conservation.
Yeah, so they have been charged by the state to oversee this 30x30 initiative. So this Vermont Conservation Strategy Initiative is part of the work that they're doing for that 30x30 program.
Yeah, if you open up the FAQ, document from their website, that's probably the fastest way to kind of browse it. The stakeholders across Vermont celebrated the passage of the Community Resiliency and Biodiversity Act in June of 2023. Legislation puts Vermont on course to protect ecological functions and landscapes with ambitious goals of conserving 30% of Vermont's landscape by 2030 and 50% by 2050. The Vermont legislature has directed the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources and Vermont Housing and Conservation Board to public input as they inventory the current state of conservation in Vermont and develop a long-term plan to reach these ambitious goals. With that for something.
And they put together these different focus groups or roundtables that they're gonna look at different topical areas that apply. So we have conservation categories roundtable, which was last week. Aquatic systems tonight, big lands and ag. It's a large initiative that they're working on. Welcome, Melinda.
I
How's it
just
going?
wanted to sit in on this.
Oh, I thought you wanted muffins. Yourself to muffin or scones.
Coffee's over there.
So Simon, do you know anything about what they're gonna be interviewing us? Any
I think
specifics?
they said they'd give a very short presentation, and then I think they've got like some standard questions they like to ask.
Okay.
And then it's more of a discussion.
This commission loves open-ended questions.
Any other announcements or updates while we're waiting for Zariah to log in? Wanda, how are things going in the Energy Commission? Oh, we've got you here.
The committee,
Committee.
fine. Yeah, but we're working on, the updating the enhanced energy plan. I was thinking maybe it'd be good if, the two, commissions met, together to talk about siting policies at some point.
Yeah,
Okay.
that joint meeting with the HDAC was good.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's good to also just meet people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and actually even the housing committees expressed an interest in meeting with you all three.
Jeez. Popular all of a sudden.
Yeah.
We'll take it. Simon, I'm trying to find a lot about Williston information on the town website, but when I Googled it, it's erroring out when I try to follow the link. Is it, did it get renamed? No.
I might have turned it off.
I don't remember turning it off. Yeah, it's been turned off. I'll probably turn it back on.
I know that we wanted to make some slight adjustments to it to make it kind of more of a memorial of information rather than the information ahead of the event.
So I was poking
Should
around
work now.
in the information on that site for Nature for Justice and ran across looked on a map of conserved land in Vermont. And I don't know how old this information was, but it had Williston as 13% conserved land.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Close to what we have.
Right, yeah, that's what you were estimating, I think, at one part.
I wonder if it predates.
Oh.
So one of the things were closer to 15.
15, yeah.
Lots of.
Yeah, and then
They were
there
the
was
teens.
a lot of
Yeah.
conversation about agriculture land and is that gonna count? Because agriculture land that cuts 4 times a year, heavy, intense haying, does that really support biodiversity? And if they take out all their hedgerows and, if you go down to Addison County and look at those farms, they've just pretty much, it's clear forever, and they've taken out all the hedgerows, they've tiled all their fields, and so really there isn't a lot of biodiversity there.
Yeah, there's a farm. I drive by on the way to my office every day. I've done all that, like 100 yards, less than 100 yards from the lake. It's killing me. It's a quarter mile from my office.
That grand,
Yes.
yeah, I think I know.
Might be south of here, but right on the corner.
Yeah. Hmm.
All right, welcome, Zariah.
Good morning.
Morning. Thanks for joining us today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
I hear I understand that you were here to chat with us about the Conservation Strategy Initiative and interview us about 30 by 30.
So I'm not here to, and sorry, I'm not sure that I followed up with folks. So we're doing 2 focus groups with conservation commissions in general. So my hope is to present to you all what the Vermont Conservation Strategy Initiative is and invite you all to those meetings. And so I've got a presentation for you all and then happy to take any questions if that makes sense.
Sounds great. Go ahead and does she have?
You should have sharing privileges. I hope anyway.
Great. Okay.
That's interesting.
Awesome. Can everyone see that? Okay.
Not okay.
It's elongated.
Yeah, maybe try stopping the screen share and restarting it. It's
done something very strange.
Yeah.
It's like Windows 95 and the things that would happen when you moved a window around.
How about now?
Yeah.
Oh, there it is.
All right, go for it.
That's great.
Does that work? Great. Great. So I'm Zoria Hightower. I'm the team lead for the Vermont Conservation Strategy Initiative and the U.S. Managing Director for Nature for Justice. I'm just going to start at the beginning, but in 2023, the legislature passed the Biodiversity and Community Resilience Act, which sets forth a bunch of goals and a vision for maintaining ecologically functional landscapes that help support our watersheds, our climate, our farms and forests, recreation, historic settlement patterns. So a mix of development and conservation. And the legislature specifically tasked the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board to lead that effort in consultation with the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources, and VHCB hired Nature for Justice to help support outreach for this work. Partner organizations include the Vermont Land Trust, the Nature Conservancy of Vermont, the Audubon Society, Trust for Public Land, and the Vermont Association of Conservation Districts. So those are the folks that have been leading, kind of thinking through how to do this work with Nature for Justice. There's a couple of deadlines to the project. The first one is coming up this summer, which is to do an inventory of conservation in Vermont. So that includes existing and potential conservation data, practices, programs, and funding, and a recommendation of how to proceed with phase 2. Then phase 2 is to actually make the plan of how we're getting to the long-term goals, which is to get to 30% of land conserved by 2030 and 50% of land conserved by 2050. But again, not just getting to that amount of land, but getting to, going back to that first slide, ecologically sustainable landscapes. And so right now we're working on this inventory for the summer, and then we've got another 1.5 years to come up with a comprehensive strategy, which will include budgeting and proposals and everything else by the end of 2025. And if anybody has any questions, you don't have to wait till the end. You can jump in at any point. So right now we're working on that first phase, which a lot of it is around data. So working with the Agency of Natural Resources and the Vermont, I'm already forgetting the Center for Geographic Information, maybe, to collect, kind of understand what data that we have, how duplicative it is, how clear it is, how comprehensive it is. And so doing some cleanup around that data and doing some understanding of how to better manage data in the future so that it's accessible to more people. And we're not duplicating efforts between nonprofits and state agencies and so on. Organizing that data in a spatially explicable and shareable format. And then the second part is identifying and articulating current state and opportunities. So that's part of what this process is. So the act called for 3 different categories, which were 3 different categories. I guess I won't go into them now. And suggestions for modifications, asked to survey and access equity of practice programs and funding that are currently used or that could be used to meet those goals. And so those are the 2 things that we're trying to get done by the summer of 2024. And in order to do that, we're getting input, especially for that second piece around what are we doing now? What could we be doing from a wide variety of things. We did around 50 interviews that we're wrapping up this week that we started in November. There's 4 working groups to answer 4 pretty specific questions that the legislature asked. Those started in November and are supposed to give some kind of initial reporting by March, but potentially meet again in May after we go through another round of public feedback. We have about 130 survey responses, which are open to the general public and are on the website, which is at VHCB. And that is almost complete. So we've got a few more that are coming in, but we're about to close that to analyze that data. And so the next phase of those are the 3 things that we've done so far. And then what we're planning next is a series of focus groups. So affinity-based focus groups are currently being scheduled, should be scheduled by the end of this week, and then we'll start next week and go on through early April. And then all of that information will go into a series of what are going to become annexes for the final report. And we're going to try to find a way to disseminate that information to the public so that we can have one big public meeting of like, this is what we heard so far, across interviews, across working groups, across surveys, and across focus groups. And I'm going to assume that's going to be in early May, but could also be in late April. And so the act laid out a pretty broad group of stakeholders that we want to hear from. That includes public and private land managers, land trusts, funders, policy, environmental justice advocates, indigenous groups, farm and forest and rec owners, reps from working land enterprises, outdoor rec orgs, conservation commissions, and then municipalities and regional planning commissions. And so one of the things that we're hoping to do is to have focus groups specifically kind of, especially to represent the municipalities from conservation commissions. And so we want to have 2 focus groups, one in person and one remote, to hear from you all on what you think makes sense to do within the Vermont Conservation Strategy Initiative. Whoops, and that was a different slide than what's supposed to be there, that I think I hit the wrong one. But some upcoming dates is February 21st, so this evening at 5:30, we've got the aquatic systems roundtable that's coming up, and then March 27th, we're having the in-person Conservation Commission cohort hosted by the Mad River, which is Waitsfield, Warren, and one other conservation commission that I'm forgetting. So they're hosting an in-person at the Waitsfield Town Hall, and then March 30th, there will be a virtual focus group hosted by the Association of Conservation Commissions. So that's where we're hoping to ask some of the questions that you probably thought I was asking today around how do municipalities fit into the picture of both data collection, but also how do we support urban resiliency and biodiversity through municipal efforts. And I'll stop sharing my screen so I can see you all, but happy to take any questions and go back to any of those slides.
Excellent, thanks, Soraya. So I guess first question that comes to my mind is we have a lot of conserved land and various GIS layer forms here in Williston. I think that's all loaded into the A&R Atlas, but I'm not entirely sure, or I'm not sure how we convey that to this project.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and one that I think we've also been wrestling with. So it's been a little bit of a chicken and egg problem, because one of the working groups is called conservation categories, and they're supposed to parse apart what is an ecological reserve, what's a biodiversity area, and what is a natural resource management area. And they haven't completely decided yet what municipal lands fall into in those 3 categories. So one of the proposals has been, when they've already done their roundtable, but one of the proposals was to create like a new category that's more about that isn't lands that aren't specifically for conservation, but that have other positive conservation or resiliency goals, such as urban recreational land, or I forget what the other thing was, but to how do we make sure that we're incentivizing that without watering down some of the ecological reserve areas, or things that are supposed to be more, that we think of more as the traditional wilderness. And so I don't know that they've come to that conclusion yet, but definitely one of the questions has been is how do we gather data from such a variety of municipalities? Because my understanding is right now it is a little ad hoc as to what is in the database and what isn't, depending on who's maybe worked with what other organization that's maybe had input into the database. And so
related to this, there's a master's student at UVM that is co-advised by Cecilia Jenks and myself, that is creating a GIS. What?
Who are you?
Who are me? Who am I? I'm Kim Coleman. I'm faculty in the Rubenstein School at UVM. Anyway, there's a master's student, her name is Julie Frost. I think she's on one of the conservation commissions in the Valley, so I'm wondering if she might actually attend one of those March meetings. I emailed her as you were talking, but one of the things she's doing is creating a GIS layer of town forests as part of a grant that's in partnership with the A&R and Forest Service. And so I just wonder if that might be helpful for I don't know, your group to look at whatever she collects, or for you to talk, because the thing we're realizing as she's talking with conservation commissions is that they don't even all know the forest that they own.
probably unsurprising. Yeah.
I don't know if that's like a helpful layer, GIS layer to know about, but it should be completed sometime this spring.
That's amazing. And I think that definitely is a helpful layer. I will happily nudge our data person, which is not me. And then is there a good way to connect him with that effort? I'm happy if you email vermont.conservation@gmail.com, that's always the way to get a hold of us in general, but I can also follow up with his email if that's helpful.
I think either way is fine. And I sent her an email, so possibly she'll get in touch with you, but I'll also tell her about this because I think she's sort of like just also trying to figure out how to be the most complete and then how to be the most useful to other initiatives. So yeah,
and that's definitely one of the things that we've talked about, and like with the data piece specifically, is how much do we take a step back and go, okay, you know, it's great that we had this one database that like at a moment in time was updated, which was a couple of years ago now, and how do we make it a little bit more open source so that folks who do these kinds of projects don't have to go through getting to the right person at ANR or at VGCI to get their data into the database, but can, you know, upload data and then we can do some automatic cleaning kits that creates.
Question for Simon, actually, is that we were just looking at a map with a bunch of, you know, wildlife habitat, critical wildlife habitat identified. Is that all in the public domain and it's available to organizations like this or this level of effort?
So our maps are all, anyone can request our maps really, I guess, and they're all out there posted on the website. The specific map we were talking about there is a wildlife habitat map. It's not, I mean, this was something I was quite interested in, is like, is there a working group whose remit is to figure out what counts as conserved land? Because we've got different types of things. So we've got town-owned land that's not conserved, but we just decide we don't want to do anything with it. We've got town-owned land that is conserved through an easement. We've got land that we don't own but is conserved. And then we've got our own special Williston flavor of conservation, which is we've got land that was set aside during development review, and our bylaws say we won't allow any development on. I was just wondering if there was, like, not to get too bean counter about it, but if we're hitting the 30%, like, is there a working group that's sort of figuring out what counts? You know, does it have to be the gold standard under easement? Or is there like a lesser standard that we're comfortable with? Just wondering if those discussions were taking place as well.
Yeah, one of the working groups is focused specifically on that. They already had their roundtable last week, otherwise I would invite you to it. But so for the like 2030 goals, it's pretty, like, the legislature is pretty clear that what counts has to be things that are both legally conserved and that are considered permanent, or as close to like permanent as we can think of. And then 2050 is a little bit more flexible. And so the working group has had a lot of questions of like, what is permanence? Like, how difficult would it have to be to change the use of the land before it's considered permanent versus impermanent? And then, which is part of the reasons that municipal lands, and I didn't go to all of their meetings, but I think that municipal lands were often put into the like not permanently conserved category. So they're like, maybe that makes sense to put into a latter category, because to the extent that they're not necessarily that an act of the city council or what they're called in that
Select board discretion. Yeah.
Yeah,
Select board can decide to change the use.
Exactly, that's not as permanent as maybe the act sought out. And so how do we capture and incentivize those towards the 2050 goals, even while maybe not counting them in the 2030 goals? Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
There is a working group working on that, and they're definitely struggling with some of the, what do we want to incentivize versus what counts.
So it sounds like you're setting up almost like a tier system where you mentioned your gold standard is those lands that are legally permanently conserved, and then there's, that would be tier 1 or whatever, and then tier 2 and tier 3 would be not quite meeting those standards, but potentially could get there.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, and then the last piece, which is less important, I think, for municipalities, but specifically, there's a whole nother working group working on how does agricultural land fit into that? Because that's also something we want to preserve, but also not necessarily something that supports biodiversity goals. And so how do we preserve farmland and support biodiversity goals?
Economic thing, yeah.
Have they finished their roundtables, the agricultural?
No, agriculture's roundtable is in March, and I can tell you those dates right now if you give me a second. And then State Lands has their roundtable, and they just pushed it because they said they weren't ready to give a presentation on where they're at.
No.
Zariah, that answered the what you were talking about the tiered approach for 2030 versus 2050 and what the legislature is looking for. That answered my primary question, because this body has been talking about is 30% achievable for Williston, given our proximity to Burlington and the development pressures and so on, and is 50% feasible, and on what timescales? Because I know that these are state goals, so not every town necessarily needs to be equally conserved. But we're in a relatively good position because of zoning history in Williston. And I think the tiered approach, thinking about it as a tiered approach for 2030 being permanently conserved lands and 2050's goal, having more flexibility to get the remaining opportunities counted. I think that is an interesting approach for Williston to consider, because we do have, through our open space requirements in the agricultural rural zone, we do have a significant amount of acreage that's not legally conserved, but is undevelopable under the current bylaw.
Yeah, and I definitely, I mean, amazing, obviously, if towns can make it to 30% conserved. And yeah, I don't think that it's the goal for every town to make it to 30%, especially given, just how like state land, like even just given state lands, how much of it is not, like in some of the denser, not in Chittenden County. But yeah, I think that's one good question. And maybe, you can also help me think through some of the March agenda. I think that's going to be an interesting question. It's like, to what extent do towns want, like what are town goals that, should be pushed or could be thought about that can support the 30 by 30 and 50 by 50 goals, and how do we talk about that?
Do we have a sense of what towns would need to collectively conserve in order to support these goals on the state level? Like, if we know here's the state and federal land,
what remains for towns to do?
What percentage do towns need to average collectively? And then thinking like, okay, Wolcott's gonna probably come in at a different level than Williston.
No, we definitely do not have that at all. So I think what we do have is the Vermont Conservation Strategy Design, which is a geographic kind of conservation design plan. And then we're going to have this data on so I guess Vermont Conservation Design is a little bit about ideally, and then we're going to now update our what is on the ground now. So I think with that, we'll be able to see in a geospatially explicit format, what some of the gaps are, but that'll be hopefully this summer, and that may even be making some assumptions around what the data tells us or is. So, but yeah, so I don't know that I won't speak for how much we'll be able to do on the analysis side around being oh, that means that this town, if we break it up into municipalities, should be doing this and that, but I assume that analysis would be possible.
Something I've seen raised is the need for things like town land trusts, so that when VLT or TPL isn't interested because it's not a landscape level conservation effort, and it's smaller stuff. We need ways to establish and hold those easements on a local level. So I'm sure that's coming up in the other roundtables, but
Yeah,
we face that. We have plenty of properties that we'd love to work on. We just don't have any partners to work on it with. So we just miss out on those opportunities, or they don't develop.
yeah, I haven't heard that yet for on a town level, but definitely have heard that on a like parcel size level. It's just that there's that, you know, the organizations who support conservation are just disincentivized from working on even high value small parcels as opposed to lower value, really, really large parcels, because it just doesn't look as good to say we conserved 3 really great acres over we conserved 3,000 acres. So yeah, definitely I've heard that small parcels are getting left behind. Even the ones that have clearly identified like really high biodiversity or ecological value.
That way, that's because I noticed on your like one of your sort of 5 questions you're asking is about improving equity. And I was just is that baked into each of these roundtable events?
Yes, so
Yeah.
there's a question bank of way too many questions for any group to get through all of them. And so I haven't done the work yet of parsing out like who we're gonna ask what questions yet, but I think most folks will probably get a question. Most focus groups will get a question around like how, you know, their programming or the work that they're doing could help improve equity.
Right, because conserving 50 acres in Williston or Burlington or somewhere like that could be equally as valuable from some perspectives as conserving 500 out in the Northeast Kingdom.
Right.
It doesn't really help you meet that 30 by 30, I suppose.
Right.
Particularly if it's in, like, we had mapped where our trails and public areas were a few years ago, and there's a section of town that is like way less served, right? That it's way harder to access for people in that. So conserving something there could seem so much more valuable in terms of providing access.
Yeah. I don't know if Simon can pass on. I did put in the meeting chat the other roundtable dates with the state lands roundtable, I know being postponed from March 7th to the next week. And then the web.
I've just emailed that round to everyone. Thanks for doing that. So that's the three roundtables and the link to your website. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, and then I'll just share my screen for a second for folks who don't, again, for folks who don't have but this is so this is the like summary of the questions. So these are the like groupings of the questions, just to give you a sense of like the kinds of things that we'll be asking is what are our values in creating the conservation plans, like what should we be thinking about, what kinds of lands count toward the goals. So what we were just talking about a lot, how are we getting there? So like what practice programs, methods. So, you know, the person who said something about like, oh, do we need like municipal land trusts? That would be like an idea, a new program or organization. How do we improve equity and what are our current and potential funding opportunities? And obviously all of those are pretty
in
big.
Williston here, there's a lot of conserved agricultural land, so it'll be interesting to see how the ag roundtable group just comes out, the decision. I did sit in on one of the discussions, and they were saying that some farms really don't qualify at all to have any biodiversity really, but then other farms do create a lot of opportunity for biodiversity. And this one farmer was saying that there's kind of a change in the way farms are being developed now. Instead of hundreds and thousands of acres for dairy farms, there are smaller farms that are doing more sustainable agriculture and things, and they might be more, you know, better for biodiversity, so that these smaller parcels shouldn't be disregarded, you know, that they are going to be important.
We just had an example before this of the potential impacts of orchard, right? And not all farming and agriculture is the
Right.
same. Orchards obviously have a totally different nature than a cornfield or soy.
Yeah, it's definitely been very, because to some extent, you know, like Vermont still imports the vast majority of its food, and we know that any kind of locally grown agriculture, food or grain or whatever it is long-term resiliency and is a much more, supports biodiversity much more than all of our international food systems that we have. And so it's hard to say, it's like, so they're definitely, I know the agricultural group is definitely wrestling with the, like, overall, we know that's like, we don't want to lose more agricultural farmland in Vermont. Like, we want to maintain it, period, to support even including biodiversity and conservation goals, and not current, likely, we know that we've got a lot of practices and or that are really harmful to biodiversity on farms, and how do we reconcile not wanting to lose that and spending conservation money on farms that, you know, maybe aren't supporting biodiversity in the way they could be, given the right
As it
incentives.
is, it seems that if the group decides that large farms that do, you know, hay 3-4 times a year and really don't, you know, add to biodiversity, I think Williston's percentage will drop for the 30-30, because
Mhm.
there's a fair amount of farms that are, you know, mowing a lot, and that's conserved. But they would qualify, it sounds like they'd qualify for the 50-50 potentially.
Potentially, yeah. I'm also curious to see what the agricultural group will get to in terms of recommendations by March 12th.
And when I Googled 30-30, the first thing that came up, that's all I put in, was the first thing that came up is women in policing. So having 30% of the force by 2030, but then one of the other ones was food in Vermont. 30% of our food produced in state by 2030. Interesting.
Yeah, which right now I think we're at around 10.
Yeah.
Excellent. Anything else? Any other questions for Zariah? Zariah, do you have anything else for us for today?
No, just wanted to again ask you all to save the date and spread the word. I know the Association of Conservation Commissions already sent out the email about the in-person one. I don't think they've done the virtual one yet, and I also don't know how good their network is and how up to if folks are getting those emails. So just would love for folks to spread the word about the March 27th in person and the March 30th virtual meeting, so we can, yeah, have a good turnout among municipalities, because that's kind of you're going to be our biggest touch point for talking about how municipalities fit into this.
Zariah, how long is the public survey going to be open? You mentioned it's closing soon.
Yeah, I think it was originally supposed to close this last week, but we haven't gotten around to having time. We're still analyzing the interview, so I'll probably put on the website that we'll close it at the end of February. So we've got another week.
Simon, is it possible to include that in, I don't know if there's a planner's corner coming out soon, but include a note to the public that this process is going on, and if the public wants to comment, the time is running out, but this is a survey.
Right. And there are other focus groups. So we're going to have around 25, probably a little bit more focus groups, and some of them are pretty general. So it's like folks who recreate in Vermont or something like, so there is an opportunity for folks to kind of give more detailed input before the like large public meeting. And then of course, this is just the first round of feedback into a 2-year process. So. Well, thank you all so much for having me, and happy to, again, you can write vermont.conservation@gmail.com with any questions or thoughts about the initiative. And then my email is zhightower@nature the letter 4 justice.org. So thanks so much
Okay.
for having me.
Yeah, thanks for letting us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Looks like we're right on time with the work we're doing.
Yeah.
I was worried that it was like, we kind of missed the boat, but it sounds like we're right on time.
Yep.
Eric, did you make scones?
They're terrible, you shouldn't have any. I'll take some home.
One thing I was thinking of with the farmland, with the farmland, how much of it do we have on any type of conservation?
Like Cycles, the Bruce Farm.
Yeah.
Do we have, I mean, is it
Have some.
half of farmland in Williston? It'd be interesting.
Yeah. I don't
Because
know.
some of it, I'm sure, is not. I mean, it could be used for ag, but then it could also be sold for development and things like that too.
Yeah, and then there's.
Who's north of Catamount, that's conserved by Fish and Wildlife?
Oh, that was the swampland for maple tree or the surf or something, isn't it?
I know, you mean, I can't
Where the,
remember the name.
where the horses were, right across from Pat Brown's. That piece.
I don't know where Pat Brown lives, but like immediately north of Catamount. Immediately north of the north part of Catamount.
Right.
Um,
And Conan's, no.
no,
West of Cal.
Fontaine.
Fontaine.
Yes,
Oh, yeah,
the Fontaine, and then their interview was really interesting with the UVM student in 2022, because they talked about losing, state assistance or tax benefits as an agricultural operation because of not getting more than 50% of their income from agriculture.
That was the river you.
Yes, right.
On the other river.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that's kind of, I mean, what's really conserved?
That's
They're not.
that's Fish and Wildlife, yeah, it's just, we don't,
Permanent?
I think, yes, I mean, I've heard them like grumble about like the way that it's shaken out for them, yeah. It seems like if they could easily undo it, they would.
They would do it.
Or maybe they wouldn't do it, but
I know they have some type of agreement with us for that new access
yeah.
and other things and then.
And Whitcomb Farm is down there too.
Yeah.
That's probably in current use.
Yeah, but that's a short term.
Yeah, current use is undoable, it's just costly.
Yeah,
Or
well,
you just don't apply it when the time period's up, like 5 or 10 years.
I'll just let it expire.
And that was
And then
one of the-
Starting back to back. Yeah.
one of the questions is were they gonna consider that as conserved?
Right, that's what I'm getting at.
Because it's
is
not permanent.
What will be the level of conservation, right?
I need to head out. Sorry, I have to leave early on your last day, Simon. But
Okay.
it's, if you wanna pile those up onto some paper towels.
yeah.
Oh, good idea.
Yeah, it's been great working with you the last few years and getting us out of the pandemic.
That's been fun.
Yeah.
The move to in-person is great.
Yes.
Yeah.
We meet people. Which is nice.
When do you actually move back?
Not till May.
Okay.
We've got some things to do first.
Yeah.
Enjoy some time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we'll see
Thanks,
you
Eric.
around until you head out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Great.
See you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you for the snacks.
You'll be ready to go.
Yes.
Okay.
See you soon.
See ya.
Is this the end of it? Do we have more?
No, that's all I've got. I don't know if anyone else has got anything for the meeting. If not, I can end it.
I just have one thing, which is that master's student that I mentioned is gonna be trying to reach out to conservation commissions, so maybe we could have her in at some point to talk to us. She's basically trying to make an inventory of all town forests in the state. And it's
That would be great.
trickier than you'd think.
Ethan has.
What
it
is
every
a
time.
forest?
Yeah.
A
What is
lot
a
of the
municipal
town
forest?
forests aren't mapped or people aren't aware of them. I
So-
would think the state would have a.
You would think the state, so Elise, like Urban and Community Forestry is a partner on this, and many are, however. There are lots of towns that own forested land that are like. We don't think of this as our town forest, it's just a parcel that we own, right?
Like Brownell, is Brownell a town forest or what is it?
It's town-owned forest.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not the forest, yes.
It's not a town forest.
No.
See, but it's forested.
Conserved open space,
So
maybe.
right now, we know about like 150 something-ish town forests, but we think
Out
there's
of what, 250 or something?
Yeah.
51.
we think there's probably more, and then more to the point, how are they being used? Are they conserved? What
Are they
programming?
managed at all?
Are they managed at all? What are they providing to their communities? And like the long-term goal of this is to have a list of them and the contact people so that urban and community forestry at the state can on an annual basis figure out the status of what's happening on those forests and what programming individual municipalities might need in order to manage them better. So like, we have a lot of resources in town, right? And we have a really engaged county forester. But there are towns that don't have resources and counties that don't currently have county foresters, or there are some counties that like share across 2 counties. And so that, like, we have a lot of resources, but not every town does. And so urban and community forestry would like to understand what all resources they might provide, you know, like they might apply for Forest Service grants to implement other programs. So in any case, Julie's gonna be going around to conservation commissions and I'd love to just like have her come in.
I mean, the county foresters should know each one. How many
Yes,
town forests?
But they don't.
They don't. I know Ethan's pretty. up
But
on- he's,
Ethan works in like the highest resourced county in the state and he's more engaged than everybody else. Some counties don't, like there are some county forester positions that are vacant.
he was covering for like Rutland or something.
It's,
Oh,
I can imagine,
yeah.
as a general matter, it's weird that Vermont doesn't have county administrative offices. I mean, the county just exists as a county, but there's no central governance function to the county. And that in itself is weird, so I would expect that, like, yeah, it's unusual for a county office which doesn't exist to have a forester.
Yeah. So,
Interesting.
And also like, say Williston buys a forest, right, like, or brought out, right? We don't have to go tell the county forester we
No.
own this, write a management plan for it.
right,
It's like the county forester. And also the amount of work that those folks get just on current use for individual landowners, forget public land. Is astronomical. I honestly don't know when Ethan sleeps.
yeah, I know.
Um,
It's like the Energizer.
right, so I wouldn't imagine that the whole state is as organized or as,
Right.
Yeah.
I can imagine if you're like a town of 1,000 people and someone left you a forest in 1924.
exactly,
It's
exactly.
like, oh, that's our forest. Or is it written down? Are there any signs? No, it's just our forest.
Right,
Mhm.
think of
Yeah.
our Pine Ridge
Yeah.
property, like, we don't have a management plan in there.
Right.
We're
Where's
not,
Pine Ridge?
exactly, exactly,
Yeah.
right, is
On
that a
outside
town
Canada.
forest?
Right, it could be, I mean, it's.
It's a
Yeah, but
town-owned
It's not
forest.
the, I mean, there's the town forest for most towns, I would think. I mean, half of them, that's the thing we're gonna learn from this
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
It's great.
School districts own forests, or the, like, Harwood Union High School owns a forest, they source wood chips there. Is that a town forest? I don't know.
Interesting question.
Could be.
David, I have one other brief update.
Oh, yeah, great.
And it's just that I went to one of Eric Wells' open office hours with the town manager. And I talked to him, I had a nice long conversation. We talked for about 35 minutes about the current budget that's going through, and then also the future of funding for things that are chronically underfunded, like affordable housing, conservation, ed, so on and so forth. So we had a good conversation. He's definitely thinking about all those things. He's very aware of the situation, but also very cautious about increasing funding for things. So what I got
At
out of
the
it.
open office, I saw he emailed us with like open office hour.
Yes, so I went to the library and luckily nobody else came at the same time. I came at lunch hour and it was just me and him, so we just sat and chatted for a while. And my biggest takeaway was that, for sure, the current select board and his approach is to, build a budget each year based on what we did the previous year and stay as close to that as possible. It's basically the plan, and if there's any room within the current level of funding to do some extra things here or there, then looking at that, but status quo is kind of the default.
So if we ended, so if a previous year had very little for ERF, we're probably gonna continue. that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Well,
so
that means we should have gotten
squeeze.
50,000.
Squeeze and squeeze and squeeze.
Yeah, yeah.
How do we like get public option tax money into the ERF?
Well, that's what Shelburne, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is
that's
going,
why
yeah.
I'm like, how do
Yeah.
we do that?
Yeah, so, but he is supportive, in concept of the idea of creating, permanent funding streams for things that, like this, because, it's the process of him and the select board choosing to add funding for things that is difficult.
Hmm.
But if it was already baked in, it wouldn't be difficult for them.
Right.
So I think it really supported our conversations about trying to find dedicated funding streams that aren't discretionary.
Did you talk at all about the ARPA funding recommendations that this commission made?
I did not.
Mhm.
I know that there's been a lot of conversations with planning commissioners and who, including their gripes about the things we recommended, and they wrote in supporting not making it in. So I didn't go into the ARPA funds. I stuck to kind of our long-term funding needs.
Be curious to know what that decision making is, because the ARPA funding is very time dependent, very.
They
Yeah,
probably use it for like a short term to minimize the increase in tax.
that's what yeah,
My guess is that's what they'll be thinking.
but all of the things that we identified there, which kind
we're
of
short term.
were short term, could be.
Right.
Also, that feels just like kicking the can down the
Yeah,
road, like,
yeah.
it's just not a good long-term.
I did bring up, that there's a general sense for me that, items that are brought forward by a department head are way more likely to make it into the budget than items that are brought forward by the planning commission, conservation
Oh, good
commission,
point.
without a person who is owning it, driving it, and is there from before the budgeting process begins all the way through, working on the budget with the town manager and stuff. So I called that out, and just said, we need better representation for long-term planning and conservation type initiatives, so that we're part of the budgeting process all the way from the beginning to the end. And we don't get squeezed out as the department heads work with the town manager on the final proposal. So. I don't know if he agreed with that view, but
Yeah.
I shared it.
Well, he has three more chat sessions. So healthy living and the library, so.
Yeah, he was very welcoming. We had a great conversation. He shared some things I wasn't familiar with. He's obviously very in tune with all the different expenditures the town is making and why we're making them. So I got the sense that he's very aware and very open to feedback. But his approach is very different from ours, so I encourage you to go and chat with him if you have time.
He deals with the numbers every day. It's part of his job.
He knows, like, for instance,
Yeah.
exactly what week of training the different firefighters are in, and so like he down to
Yeah.
who's being hired, what they're doing, when are they getting trained.
Right.
Yeah.
He's the town manager,
Yeah.
Just have
that's his
it.
job.
gotta know those things.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that conversation we had, about the ARPA budget recommendations, like, that was really productive. It's interesting for me in my first year here to see that these commissions are not involved in town budgeting decisions, which seems like a wasted opportunity, given the fact that so many commissions meet on a monthly or bi-weekly basis, you know, and then we have good relationships with staff and, you know,
Right.
Matt has to put a budget together, right? So.
Yeah, I think I should mention this, it came up at Sustainable Williston, but one of the things that was brought up was that, in some other towns, for instance, I think South Burlington does this. The select board members each sit in with a commission. So there's a select board member who is always at conservation commission meetings, there's a select board member who's at energy committee meetings, and so when things come before the select board, there's somebody on the select board who can speak to it intelligibly and say, yes, I've heard all the discussions, here's what's going on with it. And they can sort of help, bring forward things from the town plan more robustly to a conversation rather than an after fact, like, okay, well, the commission has looked at the town plan and they're recommending this, do we want to do it, yes or no? And it's just not as, the town plan isn't as central in the conversation. I feel like when you have, if a select board member were sitting in with each of the commissions, they would sort of be a direct conduit to say, here's why it's important, and really have been steeped in it.
Well, the Catamount Community Forest has a select board member assigned. He doesn't show up, but, I mean, Mike, but he's rarely there, but when Jeff Bears was there, he was pretty regular, and he did. Well,
Jeff also had like a deep connection to Catamount.
Yeah, so he was definitely, but it is true that there is is that the only committee that?
As far as I'm aware, planning, DRB and housing and energy don't have a select. I
Yeah.
don't really know why there's a select member on this particular committee.
I just think it might be.
But it is.
It's
Too
gonna
bad.
make life important.
We need more select board
Maybe
members.
has to be.
Yeah, I don't know how many select people are on, South Burlington's, but it
I
just
think
seems.
if they're a city council, then they've got a different model. I presume they
They
get
might have,
larger
like-
stipends.
Yeah, maybe a little different,
I would assume, I don't know.
but I definitely think that we have I would say at least half the time we have like well, this is what we're thinking, what are they thinking? It's an us them thing with the select board, and I think if we had a select board member who was like here and part of the
Yeah.
conversation, it would feel very different, so it's something to consider.
Maybe if we met other than 7 in the morning.
Yeah.
We might get.
Just like Gene came wild from Williston, that was great.
Yes, that was good.
All right, I have to run, I'm sure others do as well.
Well, before I go, I want to present Simon with a little something to remember
Right.
us. Your own little beaver stick from Allenbrook.
Oh, nice.
Memory.
Are these beaver marks?
Fully chewed.
That's
Yeah.
fully chewed. It's a real beaver stick from
Nice.
Allenbrook. And the string,
He's taking all the
obviously.
bark off it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
oh yeah, they were very busy. The
Yeah,
ends are
yeah,
nicely
finished with that.
chewed.
Yeah,
And you know where the string is from?
this looks like a catamount string. Is this a outdoor family center string? Yeah.
That was the tree swap.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
When we went with Ethan and the outdoor center and we picked trees that, Simon was with us and Ethan swapped trees to leave or take down when we at Catamount.
Nice.
Yeah.
That was a great.
That was good. That was good. That was when we had some snow last year.
Yeah, we
It's
actually,
fun.
there was snow.
Yeah.
We snowshoed.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for all you've done for Catamount too. It's,
Well, thanks. I
It's been
get
a
paid to
ride.
be here. Thanks for you giving up all your spare time
yeah.
to do this.
Yeah.
It's great.
I'd just add, Simon, that the things you've been doing that have really helped us be extra successful the last year, like going out and researching things, bringing in people to speak
Yeah.
with us from outside organizations. And then also just like every time we have a task come up that we decide needs to get done, you make sure that it gets done by the next meeting so that we can keep making progress. So really appreciate the dedication.
Yeah.
That's not
That's right, last
required,
year.
not
You're welcome.
necessarily. You often do things that,
Filling his boots.
you often do things that I view as beyond the minimum that needs to be done to get from meeting to meeting. So thank you for that.
Great, thank you.
And it's all high quality.
Very
I think, I mean, it's.
Best minutes
Very
ever,
high
Bo.
quality.
Best minute ever.
I love the numbering, yeah.
New-
That's
new
been
challenge.
very helpful.
For Andrew.
I'm excited.
Yeah, cool.
Got a good teacher too. Thankfully, I've been able to work with Simon a bit.
Yeah.
Over the last year.
Good. Got out on my pond a few times in the summer,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Excellent.
Try to soak up as much as I can.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad there's a little overlap for you that it's not like after the fact, so Simon can fill you in on what he's been doing and look forward to seeing what you want to bring to the role as well.
Yeah.